to a woman. 94% of the writing awards have gone to men. Only 3% of the acting awards have been given to actors and actresses of color. And now, that was the very year that both Denzel Washington and Halle Berry won Oscars for their performances. And we are convinced it was because of our billboard. Now, this past year, Jennifer Hudson became the 4th African-American woman in 79 years to win an Oscar, and Forrest Whitaker became the 6th African-American man to win. And of course, we take credit for that too. And here's our most recent billboard.
You know, Hollywood producers have come to us several times and they say, Guerrilla Girls, we want to make a film about the history of 60s and 70s feminism. And they say, we'd love to hear your ideas. Well, usually as soon as we tell them the ideas, we never hear from them again. But one day we were sitting around thinking, what if Hollywood did make a film about the history of 70s feminism? And the minute that idea flew into our heads, another idea flew right behind it. Maybe we're lucky that Hollywood hasn't made that film. So we decided to create the movie poster for the film we hope never gets made the Hollywood way. Okay. So we had to cast our movie, and of course we have 3 luscious babes. We have Pamela Anderson as feminist leader Gloria Steinem. We have Halle Berry as civil rights leader Flo Kennedy. And we have Catherine Zeta-Jones as Congresswoman Bella Abzug. And of course our tagline, they made women's rights look good, really good. Now, those of you in the audience who've studied the 70s feminist movement, and those of you in the audience who are part of the 70s feminist movement, will see right away that we have tried to be really historically accurate in our film. And you will remember from your studies or your experience that the great feminist leaders did wear bikinis 90% of the time. Now, to round out our credits, we made it a Jerry Bruckheimer production, directed by Oliver Stone, and get the soundtrack album by Eminem.
Now for some pure politics. We've focused on art and film stuff today, but we've also done a lot of posters about politics and social issues. In the last few years, everyone has been asking us what we are doing to help our country's efforts to fight terrorism and win the war in Iraq. First, we must tell you, we think this war needs an entirely new weapon, and we have proposed one to the Department of Defense. Here it is. It is the estrogen bomb. Now, how does an estrogen bomb work? You drop it on Washington, and all the guys in government throw down their guns, they hug each other, they apologize. I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry, it was all my fault. No, it was my fault. Then finally, they start to work on human rights, education, healthcare, and an end to world poverty. Got leftover estrogen pills out there in the audience? Send them to George Bush, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C.
Okay, so what are some of the things we would like you to take from all this? Well, first of all, change doesn't just happen, you have to fight for it. Second, we would like everyone to invent their own crazy way of being an activist, just like we did, and their own way of being an artist. And while you're at it, their own way of being a feminist, too.
Okay. So I have a few questions that I wanted to ask the Guerrilla Girls. I think the one that seems the most obvious one, and I think you'd probably love to hear about, is what was the sort of spark that sort of caused them to begin, you know? In 1984-85, and it was almost 25 years ago, that they formed as a group. So I want to hear from them the history of their formation. So I hope they can tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in 1985, the Museum of Modern Art opened after several renovations ago. They reopened with an exhibition that was called an International Survey of Painting and Sculpture. It was supposed to be the last word in what was going on in the contemporary art world around the world. There were a little fewer than 200 artists in the show and only 17 women. The stats were bad enough, but then the curator of the show said in the press, and he will go unnamed, he may be out in the audience today, anyone who wasn't in, he said, anyone who's not in my show should rethink his career. Now, that was pretty damning. So a number of us went up to the Museum of Modern Art and protested with, placards and chants and banners and in a very traditional kind of way. And at the end of the day, we made absolutely no progress. Everyone going into the museum argued with us. So we decided that it was really time to invent some new strategies to make people take this issue seriously.
And basically, we got a small group of women together, and we came into the group with the idea of putting 2 posters up on the street, and very quickly sat down and did the research. The idea was to make artists and galleries start feeling guilty about the low numbers. So the first one said, these artists allow their work to be shown in galleries that don't show women, that show 10%, And then the other one was these galleries show less than 10% women and none at all. And they were all a list of, the top artists of the day and the top galleries of the day.
And we remained anonymous because then we could name names. We could finger the galleries and finger the museums.
And that's what caused a big stir on the street, because we put up these 2 posters and all hell broke loose. And things proceeded.
Putting up the posters was an experience too. I don't think it could work now during that because we were in mask. Middle of the night, with the glue, with the buckets, with the broom, and we'd get chased by the cops. Police would come out after us, and we'd have to run from different places, and it was
fun because you could put them up on a Friday night and then hang out around the posters on Saturday afternoon when everyone was at the galleries. And we got lots of great ideas just from the interaction people had, to the posters. So,
but when we sat down and actually with statistics, we decided to use statistics, just black and white, direct. It was shocking to us. The actual it was homework. We just sat down, went through the magazines, numbered, counted, and recorded everything, and it was amazing what we came up with.
And how did you do that sort of pre-internet? Did you go and look at the archives, let's say, for the Guggenheim? And it's very easy now. I recently did a lot of research for the Global Feminisms catalog, and it was very simple. I just went on the Tate archives and could look back and look at the appalling results of how many women artist exhibitions there were.
Our secret research tool for years was the Art in America Annual.
Right.
It came out once a year, and it had everything you need in it. Every gallery just so proudly displayed a list of artists. Well, we just get down the list, and we have these 5-minute research projects. We said if it takes more than 5 minutes to get the research, we're not going to do it because that's not fast enough.
But we
So
also
thank you,
have
Art America.
moles. We have moles all over the place too, always have and always will. Give us information. And now, a lot of these institutions are playing catch up and trying to count again. The Museum of Modern Art had no idea how many women were in its collection. I mean, if you went to the museum, you could see probably none, there's hardly any, but they have just begun a project to try to identify it, and the numbers are really low, especially since they are a modern and contemporary museum.
Yeah, it was an intuitive feeling that something was not right. We all felt that for a long time, and we didn't really know how to crack or do it. So when we did it that way, when we sat down just with the information, it was shocking to everybody. So there was the answer right there on how to start to approach this.
And we went after, first artists, galleries, critics, collectors, museums. We went after one group after another. And it wasn't long after that we started thinking about, hey, we could use this kind of in-your-face, humorous way of talking about things in other fields. And many of us were activists in the world as well as artists and who wanted to be activists in the art world. So we started right away doing anti-war posters, social issue posters. What?
The Gulf War.
Yeah.
We looked at the statistics. The rules that you get as a woman in the Gulf War are, it's like the South in 1960.
So it was a real way of combining our own personal lives as artists. really combining what's in us being in the world and how it affected us as arts.
We were really operating in an atmosphere of total disbelief. Everyone wanted to think that the art world was a very liberal, open place, and that it was ahead of the rest of the world. It was sort of avant-garde. But every time we did the figures, we realized that the world of art was derriere. It was backward in the way it treated women and artists of color. But everyone in the art world had this superior attitude that, there can't be any sexism or racism, conscious or unconscious, in the way we see things. But we did get actually some apology letters from critics and curators who said, thank you for making me think about what I do, and I'm going to try hard better.
Well, it's so sort of institutionally, it's so insidiously unconscious, that I don't think people really think about it, and I think that's what you're helping to make clear. But the question I was going to have was, do you think that the things have changed? And if so, in what ways? I mean, obviously permanent collections are still not, really that great. I mean, it's Jerry Saltz recently sort of did that wonderful article about the permanent collections of the Museum of Modern Art after the reinstallation, and talked about how it was like 4% women or something were on display. It was appalling. He's been a great sort of male feminist art critic, kind of really doing some guerrilla work for us, But so where do you think things have improved and where haven't they? What sort of work do we still have to do?
Well, like any situation, any civil rights struggle, there are advances and there are setbacks. And what we found now is that it's a no-brainer. You can't have a collection or a survey or an exhibition that purports to be broad without the work of women or artists of color. That it's not possible. And you can't have an art collection that really talks about a culture without the voices of everyone in the culture. That's fine. So at the entry level and at the survey level, things are getting better. But there's a crushing glass ceiling for women and artists of color as you go up that kind of ladder. And if you look at auction results, and the auctions are this month, so take a look and see how many women artists and artists of color ever come up at auction, and whether their work sells for what white male art sells for. Look at museum retrospectives, look at monographs, see if women and artists of color really are seen as often at that level of professional success. They certainly don't get the money, and money in many ways is production. So it changes, it gets better in some ways and worse in others.
Mm-hmm. But bringing it to light, the consciousness of it, I don't think anybody can look back now and show, and as Frida was saying, not be aware of the count, what's there and what's not there, and that's a big difference. And the more artists of color and show, and more collectors become women, and the more diversity of the collectors and the curators, and your position, which helps to, that opens up the idea that there's more than one way to see something, or there's more than one experience.
Well, it really needs to begin, as you said, on the entry level and on the foundational level. And so what advice do we give to even people like collectors, who will in turn, ostensibly give, their collections to a museum, or, so again, on the foundational level, like a collector, or, again, museums with their collection policies or their permanent exhibition displays and their, exhibition programs and public programs, et cetera, on the foundational level. What advice would you give to collectors and to museums to make these broader institutions